phone buzzed. Just a minute.
We watched that Richard Dawkins thing on YouTube.
The one with the giraffe, where they're flaying the giraffe?
Yeah.
Did you watch the other one?
We also watched a couple of people with the other that went the other way with why he was wrong. So
Which?
wait to hear what you have to say.
Okay, the ones that said he was wrong are the right ones. All right, well, it is 7 o'clock, and I know I have at least one following online. Let me double check, make sure, see how that is. Yeah, we have one online, we have one on Google Meet, and my family's here, so that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us at least. So we'll begin there. So as I mentioned in my emails and in the bulletin a couple of weeks ago, these Wednesday evening Bible studies are going to be predominantly topical studies, whereas our Sunday morning services are going to be, we're going to work through the books of the Bible, like we started Matthew this past Sunday. And so the first set of topical lessons that we're going to go through is a whole series of topical lessons. And if you downloaded and printed the entire first 13 lessons, you can see that it's called Timely Topics, which is why there's a book, which is a Bible there, and then a clock on the first page of your worksheet called Timely Topics. And the first lesson from these Timely Topics is intelligent design. Now, what does that mean, timely topics? It means things that are germane to our culture right now. Things that you may have people bring up in the course of casual conversation, especially if you get on the topic of religion. Or you may get on the topic of politics, in which case you also may cross into some of these discussions. You may get into a discussion of science, and you may get into a discussion of morality, and some of these things will be there. And in fact, you may find a bunch of crossover with all of these in each of those categories. Religion, morals, politics, science, they kind of all come together because nothing can really be separated for the Christian from the central point of his life, which is listening to what God's Word says and applying it. So it applies to our politics, it applies to our science, it applies to our to our sense of morality, it applies to our sense of health, all kinds of things. So today we're going to deal with intelligent design. And the first question is, what does that mean? When you hear the term intelligent design, what are you hearing? What are you thinking of? What does it make you think of? Intelligent design.
The Lord, God creating the world rather than evolution.
Okay, so as Chuck said, there's an intelligent mind behind creation. So as opposed to evolution. So let me ask you this question. How many different beliefs are there about how the universe came into existence?
I'm sure there's a lot. I mean, I can think of 3.
Okay, Kendra says she can think of 3, which are?
I don't know if the Big Bang Theory and evolution are the same.
Okay, they kind of cross over.
And then,
They're not absolutely the same, but they kind of cross over.
of course, the Bible.
Okay, so Kendra has Big Bang, evolution, and then, of course, the Bible, which is creation. Now, I would say evolution and Big Bang kind of go hand in hand, but there are some significant differences. So generally, we think of two, right? Evolution, creation. Man's answer, God's answer of how the universe came into existence. Problem is, with man's answers always start breaking apart, right? And you can see that. I'm going to give you an example. Denominations. How many denominations are there? A lot. How many denominations did Jesus start? Chuck? How many denominations did Jesus start? Just one, which is Christianity. Does that mean, okay, so I'm not saying denominations aren't important now, they are, but you can tell when man does something, it tends to break apart because you can't find a bunch of people that agree on one thing. And so that's what happens with the origins of the universe. It really breaks into a lot of different ideas about how it came into being. Kendra mentioned Big Bang and evolution. Evolution is one category that covers a bunch of categories. So it's like the main one. And it breaks off into two other main categories, which is nihilism, which means it's all just random accident, chance, and it's all going into nothingness eventually. And then you have Darwinian natural selection, which there's some chance involved, but there's some reasoning, so to speak, behind the chance. Natural selection, that's where survival of the fittest comes in. Of course, from Darwin's point of view, you're going to have the species or the individual creatures that can adapt and deal with the struggles of living that are going to keep on living. That's natural selection, survival of the fittest. That's not the same as nihilism, which is just random chance. But they both branch out of the theory of evolution, and they both have some overlap, because Darwin's theory requires some chance for it. What's that?
Just book some station keeping here. That's okay.
Okay. So, even though there's predominantly two, they do branch off a lot. Now, we have evolution, we have creation. 6-day biblical creation, I guess it's the biblical creation, we'll call it that. You ever hear of theistic evolution? Theistic evolution is an attempt to combine Darwin's approach with the Bible's approach. So you have another one there, another category there that kind of overlaps into Darwinism, kind of overlaps into biblical creationism. The majority of it is neither. Okay? So ultimately you have all these. Somewhere in here, in this big mess of how creation began, you have this thing called intelligent design. And it kind of overlaps into Darwinism, it kind of overlaps into biblical creationism, and it kind of overlaps into theistic evolution. It touches on all of those. The question is it the right theory for Christians to adopt? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is intelligent design? First, before the question, intelligent design is a scientific theory which holds that certain features of the universe and living things are best explained by an intelligent cause and are not the result of an undirected, chance-based process such as Darwinian evolution. So, according to intelligent design, there's got to be a mind behind it. And of course, this mind has to be more than what man is, because it's bigger than man, lasts longer than man, started before man, and therefore is more than just part of the creation. And that is called intelligent design. Now notice what's absent there. What's absent in intelligent design is specifically naming what that being or intelligent mind behind creation is. Now, is that bad? Well, we'll get to that. I'm not trying to say that's absolutely a negative or that's absolutely a positive, but there are some things that we're going to look at. So, question number one, how is the theory of intelligent design different from classical Darwinism or Darwinian evolution? Well, Darwinian evolution takes a completely different approach. I don't know if Darwin was the one that came up with the Big Bang Theory. I think that came sometime after Darwin. But Darwin's idea essentially was every life form developed from a previous life form. And then those life forms developed from a previous life form. And those life forms developed to a previous life form. And what you get is a family tree that where we are right now is broad, and then it comes down to a narrow individual life form. The problem is, that's not what we see in the fossil record, right? The fossil record actually has many life forms that existed, and we're getting fewer and fewer life forms. So we're actually, Darwin's is an upside down pyramid. We have a right side up pyramid, except we don't have a top half. We see a fossil record that has very many more types of creatures than we have now. And what we have now is up here, a smaller section. So Darwin's answer is, it must have been that a lot of those died off because they couldn't adapt, they couldn't change, survival of the fittest. Okay? So only a select few of that massive fossil record managed to survive to what we have today. But all of it can still be traced back in Darwinian evolution to one microscopic life form, a single cell piece of life that started, from Darwin's perspective, millions of years ago. I don't know if you guys remember this when you were in grade school. Your books probably had a different date than mine. If you had evolution in yours, my science books, when they mentioned evolution, they were talking in the hundreds of millions of years that the Earth has been in existence. And nowadays, if you look in science textbooks, they're in the 60 billion years. So they've had to add hundreds and hundreds of millions and even billions of years to make their science work, because every time they run into a wrinkle, you know what their answer is? Add some more time, anything's possible. Biblical creation, in the meantime, has maintained a steady answer. It took 6 days. The Earth is about 6,000 to 7,000 years old. If you stretch it, maybe as much as 10,000, but that's it. Things don't change into something else. We don't need to answer those kinds of questions. So the difference between intelligent design and Darwinian evolution is intelligent design, instead of looking for an explanation with more time and more alterations in the fossil record, intelligent design says, oh, wait, this makes sense if somebody planned it to be that way. And we have an example toward the end of the lesson that we'll go into. And I think I'm going to go ahead and bring it up now, because this is where it really fits in the best in the lesson instead of waiting till the end. And that is the example of the nerve that goes to the larynx in a giraffe. At the end of the lesson, it tells you to go check out, what's the guy's name again? Bonus material.
Richard Dawson?
Richard Dawkins, right? Richard Dawkins' video. It's about a 5-minute video where some scientists are dissecting the neck of a giraffe. And Dawkins is trying to prove that there's no intelligent design in the giraffe. And here's how he proves it. There's this nerve that goes from the brain of the giraffe, which of course is all the way up at the top of the giraffe in its head, just like our brain is. And this nerve goes all the way down to the body. It follows the neck, the throat, all the way down to the heart. And it crosses under the heart artery, the main heart artery, and goes all the way back up. And it runs the larynx of the giraffe, which is right underneath its mouth, just like your larynx is right underneath your mouth.
We have that also in our body, right?
Right, so the human being has that also. The human being has a nerve that comes out of the brain, goes down, wraps around the heart artery, comes all the way back up and attaches to here. Dawkins, well, then there's another animal that is a fish. Fish also has a larynx. Did you know that? It doesn't have vocal cords, but it has a larynx. You know what the larynx does? For human beings and for most mammals, the larynx separates the windpipe from the esophagus so that you don't aspirate food and get the food in your lungs. It also, for humans and some mammals, contains the voice box and protects it so you can make sounds. In a fish, the larynx only separates the windpipe, or in their case, the water pipe that allows the water to flow through their mouth and past their gills, from their esophagus, which goes right to their belly. So they eat that way, and having this larynx keeps them from sucking water into their stomach on the one hand, or food going out their gills on the other hand. And it's all involuntary, it all happens automatically, but in a fish, the nerve goes right from the brain directly to the larynx. But not so in mammals. In almost every mammal that they found, that nerve goes all the way down to the heart and comes back up. And so according to Richard Dawkins, that is proof there's no intelligent design, because nobody who has even a child's intelligence would do such a thing. Except then, you start paying attention to this nerve, and especially you start at the embryonic stage of every mammal. The heart is in the way, is in between the brain and the developing larynx and neck, because you got to remember, when you're talking about embryonic stage, you're talking itty bitty, not a lot of room. But the heart is very necessary to start pumping blood early on. They say 10 weeks old. So that nerve goes the shortest route from the brain to the larynx, which happens to be right underneath that artery that goes right to the heart. But then as the creature grows, well, that nerve has to get longer and longer and longer. And then when it gets to full-grown stage, well, lo and behold, it happens to be all the way down here, and the way it gets back up is it has to come back. It just grows longer and stretches back up to where it needs to be. If that doesn't happen in the embryonic stage, there is no larynx, because it will die in the embryonic stage, or the artery to the heart gets cut off and the embryo dies. There's also some other things. If you dig in a little bit deeper, have you ever noticed how when your emotions change, your voice changes too? It starts vibrating and quivering. And so this nerve that goes from your brain all the way down past your heart wraps around and even has little fingers that hold on to the arteries down there and other things. Comes right back up. It can judge by your blood pressure and other things the heightened state of your emotions, so that your voice sounds different as your emotions change. Now answer me this. Does that sound like somebody intelligent designed it? That sure does, doesn't it? So Richard Dawkins just walked himself into a fool's argument, saying there's no intelligent design there whatsoever, when I come to find out there actually is quite a bit of intelligent design. That's the way it is with a lot of things in creation. We're going to get to another one later on, but let's go on to question number 2. What are your initial reactions to intelligent design as an explanation for the origin of the universe? Do you have a positive reaction or a negative reaction?
It sounds better than evolution.
Certainly sounds a lot better than evolution. What's that?
It sounds better than evolution, but it doesn't seem to be complete.
Okay, and Chuck just touched on the main point. It's better than evolution, but it's not complete. And there is a reason for that. We'll get to it in just a moment. But before we do, I want to get to this section here called Understanding Intelligent Design. Now, we call this Timely Topics, but it's important to know that intelligent design isn't anything new. It's not like it's just now come to the forefront of the discussion. It's very old. In fact, you might say ancient. Socrates had a kind of an intelligent design understanding of the universe. He was a Greek philosopher that concluded, on the basis of his study of the natural world, there had to be only one creator. And he came to this conclusion in the face of these myriad of gods that the Greeks worshipped. It's called pantheism, meaning many different gods. And you can think of the Olympic gods. You got Zeus, you got Ares, you got Athena, you got Aphrodite, you got all these different... Aphrodite, I don't think she was a god. I think she was a demigod. But anyways, you have all these different gods. And besides the ones on Mount Olympus, you have all kinds of other gods. And Socrates says, this can't be. There's too much harmony in the natural world for it to be the result of one creator. Hi, Seth. So it isn't new now, but it is current. It says current in the sense that people are always looking for a new way to make heads or tails out of what is obvious in the natural world. And what is obvious in the natural world is that there's a lot of intelligence behind it. Even the evolutionists, the full-fledged Darwinians and the full-fledged nihilistics who see no order whatsoever, they get slapped in the face sometimes by things that are quite orderly, quite organized, and they have no answer for it other than, well, that's just the way it is. Now, that's interesting, because Christians sometimes just say that sometimes the response we give, that's just the way it is. That's not a really good response for somebody who's struggling with answers. Now, we may not always know what the answer are, but we need to acknowledge that up front. Instead of saying, well, that's just the way it is, because we don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. But that doesn't mean there isn't an answer. Just like the nerve in the giraffe's neck going to its larynx. If you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, and somebody said, well, why does the nerve go all the way from the brain all the way down to the heart and all the way back up to the larynx of the giraffe? I could say that's just the way it is, but that's not an answer. right answer in 2 weeks ago for me would have been, I don't know the answer to that question. That doesn't mean there's not an answer. Now I know the answer, and so I can share that. That's the way a lot of things are. Anyways, intelligent design says, look, there's a lot more things going on here that we've got to recognize is not answered by nihilism and not answered by Darwinian natural selection evolution. So anyways, just to show that intelligent design is not a new theory, I already told you Socrates, he came to the conclusion that only one divine being could have been the source of the universe. That didn't lead him to the knowledge of the right divine being. But there have been other ones more recently. So I have here three different lines: 1802, 1859, 1996, and then there's some books that, if you want to write them down, you can. They get kind of scientific, but I think they're not so beyond us to be able to understand it. Now, Darwin gets a little bit weird, but the rest of them we can understand. So if you care to look into any of these books, I want to give you the names of them. The first book was written in the year 1802. Okay, and the author of this book is a man by the name of William Paley, P-A-L-E-Y, Paley. And the title of the book is called Natural Theology. And what Paley was trying to do with this book, 220 years ago now, was to demonstrate the existence of God apart from going to the Bible. And he did that by looking at the world, showing things that were so complicated, there's no way you could have possibly explained this apart from an intelligent mind behind it. Now, we're going to get into some of that here in a moment, but that's the point of this book, is to prove from nature that there must be a God instead of using the Bible. Then you have in 1859 Charles Darwin. The name of his book is On the Origin of Species. That's the one you've heard of. So notice there's a full 57 years between William Paley's book and Charles Darwin's book. So already 50 years prior, you can see that there were people that were looking for explanations of the universe that did not include chance, that relied completely on a divine being, but didn't necessarily state who that divine being is. That's intelligent design. Darwin's explanation is an explanation of the universe without a divine being. That's the significance of his book. No divine being needed for the universe. Then you've got this third one. It was written in 1996 by a guy by the name of Michael Behe, B-E-H-E, Behe. It's called Darwin's Black Box. And Darwin's Black Box, the point of that book was to show how Darwin's natural selection is not possible. The universe is way too complicated for it to be mere natural selection and occasional chance. So that was the significance of his book. So anyways, it's just, the reason these three books are listed here is just to demonstrate this idea of intelligent design is not new to our time. It's been around for hundreds and even thousands of years, going back to the early days of Socrates. And that's going to lead us into, well, does anybody have any questions or comments at this point? got a firm grasp on intelligent design. It's not quite full-fledged biblical creationism, but it's a step away from evolution, a significant step away from evolution. So let's go ahead and see how, number 2, intelligent design explains observable intelligence with the cause of design. In other words, intelligent design looks at the things that are made and says, can't be chance. There's too many things wrong with it for it to be chance. And I'm going to give you, well, some examples are listed here. I don't know if they're listed on your sheet or not. Let me look at your sheet. Actually, I don't have a copy of it here.
They weren't listed. No examples.
No examples listed. Okay. So we got 3 examples here that I'm going to touch on, and I'm going to give you some terms, but then I'm going to help you understand the terms. The first term is irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity. The term irreducible complexity means that something is so vital to a life form's existence and yet so complex that it couldn't have developed with chance or even natural selection. Why? Because the organism or the life form would have died immediately. So one of the examples is with the single cell bacteria that has flagellum on it. You know what flagellum are? It's like all those little tiny hairs that help it move around. No, this is the one that has the single hair that helps it move around. The single hair that helps it move around. If it did not have that single hair that helps it move around, what would have happened? Well, the reason it needed to move around was because it needs to find food. If it just stayed put, what would have happened? It would have died. Same as everything else that doesn't have food or sustenance. So you take away that single hair, or if you rely on blind chance for that organism to develop a single hair, the first time it messes up, it's dead. It can't happen again. So that means it had to develop on the first time perfectly in order for Darwinian evolution to work. Let me give you a better example, the human heart. Okay? Now an evolutionist that follows Darwinian evolution would not say, well, the human heart didn't develop right away. It developed slowly over the course of millions and millions of years. But at some point, there's some organism that would have needed a heart to work completely in order for that organism to live. And the first time, if on the first time that it tried to produce this thing that it needs to live, if it didn't produce a perfectly working heart, what would have happened? It would have died. There's the end of the heart. And according to Darwinian evolution, nothing would have ever developed the heart again because that's not survival of the fittest. You get the point. Irreducible complexity means the things that are so critical for our survival has to immediately develop perfectly and work perfectly in order for it to remain a part of the evolutionary process. The human eye is another example, or don't even have to go to the human eye. You can just go to the eye that is able to see. The first time an organism tried to develop an eye, if it didn't work, that would have been the end of the eye. But the eye is so complex, right? It needs a working window. It needs a nerve that goes to the brain. It needs the brain to be able to understand the signals. all of that in order for the eye to work. It doesn't have to be as complicated as the human eye that closes as we get more light or opens up less light. It just needs a window for light to pass through, a nerve. Well, it needs a retina, right? Because the retina is what receives the information. It needs a nerve to carry that information to the brain. It needs the brain to interpret it. All of that has to work instantaneously for evolution to be correct. That's irreducible complexity. The next one is what is called specific complexity. Specific complexity, this is kind of complicated, but I'm going to give you a picture that simplifies it. Specific complexity is that the larger quantity of components that there are that also have to be arranged in a certain order makes it less and less likely that it could have happened by chance. Now let me tell you what that means. Most of us have been in a classroom where the English alphabet was placed card after card after card after card above the chalkboard. You guys remember that? Yeah. Ours were green. And there was one after another, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Specific complexity says the fact that A, B, C, D, all the way through Z ends up in not just there, but in perfect order is so complex, it had to be done by an intelligent mind. And here's how complex it is. If you know how to do math on this, it is so incredibly complex that it just boggles the mind that for us it's that simple. But the mathematics is, well, how many letters are in the English alphabet? There's 26. In order for those letters to end up in order, here's your math. With the first one, you have 26 different letters that could end up there, correct? With the next one, that means you have 25 numbers that could end up there. With the next one, 24. So the odds of the alphabet being arranged, the mathematical odds of the alphabet being arranged in order is 26 times 25 times 24 times 23 times 22 all the way down to times 1. Let me tell you what that number is. Brace yourself. Okay? I had to look up how to say this number. This is how big it is. 403 septillion, 291 hexillion, 461 pentillion, 126 quadrillion, 605 trillion, 635 billion, 544 million to 1. Now that number, I looked this up to find out, okay, how big is this number? This number is roughly half the number of molecules in the known universe. Roughly half of the number of molecules in the known universe. It is such a hugely complex number that is required for that alphabet to appear above your chalkboard in order. Now, that's just to have them in order. Now to have them actually all on the same level, on the same plane, makes it infinitely more complex. Because they could have been one up here, one down here, one over here, one up here, in order, right? But to get them all on a line, in order, the number is so mind-boggling because now you have an infinite number of possibilities if you follow a quadrant where these letters could end up on a plane. And that's just a plane. That's not now taking into account a 3D vortex, right? So now you got even more possibility. And yet,
like playing the lottery.
It's worse than playing the lottery because the lottery, if you compare this number to the lottery, you actually stand a chance of winning the lottery, which of course you don't. but you certainly don't have a chance of by chance, the letters of the alphabet, of the English alphabet, arranging themselves in order above a chalkboard for all the kindergartners to memorize. And yet, a kindergarten teacher, just very simply, within 5 minutes' time, places those letters up there. Why can she do that? Because she has a degree of intelligence. That is what specific complexity is. You have to have intelligence, or something that is, that the more you add to it, the bigger it gets. And it has to be in order for it to work. Now, this, nobody brings up the alphabet in this connection, but there is something that is quite germane to life, and it's called DNA, right? Strands of DNA. There's a lot of information, far more than just the little bit. I forget what they say. If you could take the human DNA genome and stretch it out, how far it would be. It's that too is mind-boggling long. But it has to be in order for it to work. It's not just that it has to be there somewhere. It has to be in order for it to work. And it's far longer than the 26 letters of the human alphabet. So, bottom line is not possible. The third category is what's called abrupt diversity. And abrupt diversity just means we have no example of any creature that is in the middle of a transition from its species to another species. Now, they talk all the time about the fossil record and how it shows changes and whatnot. That's not what happens with the fossil record. The fossil record, they may be finding new species from time to time, but they're never finding an in-between. For example, if you watch Jurassic Park, any of the Jurassic Park movies, they will make some of these two-legged upright dinosaurs look a lot like birds. And some of them, from time to time, they will even put a beak on and some feathers, but they still can't fly. And how many times have you heard that dinosaurs are the foreparents of birds? You know why they say that? There's only one reason. Because they have some fossil records of reptiles walking on two legs, and their joints are kind of like bird joints. That's the only reason. They have never, ever, ever found a reptile skeletal remains with feathers or even pin feathers on it. They've never found the skeletal remains of any reptile that has hollow bones like a bird does. At least the kind of birds that fly. So, this is what is known as abrupt diversity. You've got to come up with some evidence that the T-Rex turned into an ostrich somehow. It can't just be, ooh, I see a T-Rex and he kind of looks like a bird. Must have been his descendant would have been a giant bird, but the T-Rex died off before they got to that point. But you got velociraptors and smaller upright biped reptiles that are closer to the ostrich's height, but you don't have anything in between. You don't have a reptile with feathers. Okay? That's abrupt diversity. These things demonstrate by themselves to the unbiased individual who is looking for the right answer that Darwinian natural selection is not right. Now, number 3, here's one of the faults of intelligent design. It says, intelligent design struggles to explain perceived unintelligence and imperfection. What do I mean by unintelligence or imperfection.
Can you repeat that, please, again?
Yeah, intelligent design struggles to explain perceived unintelligence and imperfection. In other words, when they see something and it's like, it looks like it's broken maybe, why is that way? Or here's something, but I don't know what it does. Why is that? Give you some examples. Intelligent design has no answer for something like Down syndrome. Intelligent design has no answer for something like, for diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, arthritis and whatnot. Intelligent design would have no answer for, an example that's listed here is a panda bear's false thumb. Another example you can come up with is, they say that every human being, when they are starting off as embryos, they develop a bit of a tail, and that tail goes away. Or, here's another example, the human appendix. Looks like a design flaw. The only thing the appendix seems to do is threaten our life. Now, we have an answer for all of these things. What's the answer? Sin. Right. God created the whole universe perfectly, but once sin entered into the world, he subjected the whole creation to futility for the purpose of us having a hope that goes beyond the here and now. So intelligent design doesn't have an answer to these things. Why? Because intelligent design is not predominantly focused on telling us who the creator is. It's just focused on showing that it must be some intelligent being, and that's it. Junk DNA is another example. For the most part, everybody has abandoned the idea of junk DNA. Junk DNA means within every cell, within every living cell, there's DNA. But some of that DNA doesn't do anything. And so from a scientist's perspective, that made it junk DNA. But this goes back to the right answer is, if you can't see what something's doing or why it is the way it is, the right answer is, oh, that's just the way it is. That's not the right answer. The right answer is, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll know. Well, now we know with what's called junk DNA, if you just remove it, it's catastrophic to the life of that cell. Things start going haywire, breaking down, the cell can turn cancerous, or it can just die altogether. So even though we can't see what this extra DNA is doing to preserve the life of the cell, it obviously does something, because as soon as you remove it, the cell has problems and or dies. That's called junk DNA. So number 4 gets us to the main point here of the lesson. Intelligent design is not a complete explanation for the origin of the universe, and therefore is not fully incompatible with natural evolution. A better way of saying that is, it's not fully compatible with biblical creation, because biblical creation does give us a complete explanation of the universe, of the origin of the universe. Well, it gives us the most complete explanation. It doesn't tell us absolutely everything, of course. Like, we don't know how light was shining on day 1 when God didn't create the sun, the moon, and stars until day 4. But it does give us an answer. It doesn't tell us what bumblebees and mosquitoes were doing prior to sin. But it does explain to us why they're a pain to us after sin came about, right? So that's important. But intelligent design just says, look, there's some intelligence involved in this. There has to be. That's perfectly reasonable. Now, number 5 is kind of the point here too. Intelligent design focuses on the design rather than the designer. So, if you are an intelligent design adherent, you may very well say Allah is the creator of all things. You may very well say the great spirit in the sky is the designer of all things. You may say Zeus is the creator of all things. Because intelligent design does not pin down who the designer is. And so, number 5 here, the point is that it's not an agnostic ideology, but it's not really a Christian idea either, because it doesn't get to the main purpose of the Bible. And we've got to recognize that the purpose of the Bible, its main purpose is not to answer our origin. Its main purpose is not to answer why are things the way they are in the world or in the universe. It does give us some answers to those things, but the main purpose of the Bible is to reveal to us, first of all, who the true God is, and secondly, how we have been separated from him, and thirdly, how we can be reunited to him in his Son, who is Jesus. That's the purpose of the Bible. Its first purpose is not to tell us the origins of the universe, though it does give us an answer to that. Its first purpose is not to tell us why my toe swells up when I stub it, but it does give me an idea of why that happens. So that's the point here of this lesson. We can be happy that there are scientists that recognize that evolution is an impossibility based on the sheer information available, but that of itself is not yet where the Bible is. The Bible is very specific, because an intelligent design adherent will not necessarily agree to a 6-day creation. A 6-day or an intelligent design adherent will not necessarily agree to a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. An intelligent design adherent will also not necessarily agree to a worldwide flood. And that means an intelligent design adherent will also not necessarily agree to such things as the 10 Commandments being given to us so that we can know our sin, and the gospel so that we can know our Savior. So that's just a brief introduction to intelligent design. Now we're going to look at some questions on the basis of the Bible and talk about them. The first one is, what value does a field of study such as intelligent design have? And it says, look at Romans 1:20. I'm going to read verses 19 and 20. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. So what value does an intelligent design study have? I think the right way of thinking of it is, it's kind of a law preaching. It's a reminder that somebody made you. You're not an accident, free to live how you want to see how it turns out. If somebody made you, you're answerable to that somebody. And more than that, you might want to find out what that somebody wants you to do. That's the law at work. So there is some benefit to it. That's, by the way, that's the reason why our culture is so opposed to even having the idea of intelligent design inserted into the public schools. You can understand why, kind of why they wouldn't want biblical creationism inserted into the school. But there's no religion in intelligent design. It's just based on scientific fact outside of the Bible. But so many secularists don't even want that. Why? Because it is a preaching of the law. It is a recognition that there is someone else out there, and you're answerable to them. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Okay. Number 2. Colossians 1:15 through 20. I'm going to actually read verses 13 through 20 because it makes it plain that this is not just God the Father involved in creation, but the Son is also involved in creation. If you go back to verse 13, it says, He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by Him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through Him and for Him. Who's the Him there in verses 15 through 16? Who is the Him? Who's the one that is the image of the invisible God? Who is the firstborn of all creation? Jesus is. And so verse 16, for by Him all things were created. Who's the creator according to verse 16? Jesus. Jesus is. In the Nicene Creed, we confess that we believe in God the Father Almighty, the one who created all things visible and invisible. But in these verses, Paul is recognizing that Jesus also created all things that are visible and invisible. And then he goes on in verse 17, He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. That's still Jesus. And He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross. So the question is, what is the biggest reason why any examination of the intelligence of the universe's design is a good starting point, but can't be the final destination? Because if you can spend your entire life, and if you could live long enough, you could spend 1,000 lifetimes. What conclusion will you never come to studying creation? Ever.
Then it was random.
No, that conclusion, well, that's true. If you studied it honestly, you would never come to the conclusion it was random. But according to these verses, what would you never even think of by studying creation? What conclusion did Socrates never come to? Okay, let me ask you this. Look up at the clouds on a nice, beautiful day. What do you see? The psalm tells us, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork, what He's able to do. When's the last time you looked up at a cloud and concluded, oh, obviously, God sent His Son into the world to suffer and die to take away my sin? Is that what a cloud tells you? No. A cloud tells you somebody's pretty smart, somebody's pretty powerful, somebody's pretty good. It doesn't tell you that somebody came to take your place under divine justice. That's why intelligent design doesn't go far enough. It doesn't get to the point of telling you what the main point of the Bible is, which is John 3:16. And you can dig up 1,000,000 fossils, and none of those fossils will ever tell you, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And you can look into the farthest reaches of the universe with the most powerful telescope, and you will never come to the conclusion, I know that my Redeemer lives. What comfort this sweet sentence gives. You'd never get that. Intelligent design, therefore, that is its weakness. Not because you can't be an adherent to intelligent design and still believe these other things, but the purpose of intelligent design is not to get you to these other things. The purpose of intelligent design is just to show Darwin's crazy. There's no way for the universe to just randomly exist. It's too complicated. But the purpose of the Bible is to give you a relationship with your Savior. And going to Romans 8, verses 18 through 22. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. So when you hear of earthquakes, when you hear of tornadoes or hurricanes, when you hear of lightning strikes causing large fires, all these kinds of things, tidal waves, whatnot, all of these things are evidence that the whole creation has been subjected to futility. So why is God's revelation in the Bible necessary not only for an understanding of observable intelligence in creation, but also for the only proper understanding of observable imperfections? This is one of the big questions that the skeptics bring up. If the being behind creation is so intelligent, what gives? What's with all this turmoil and destruction? That doesn't sound like very much intelligence. That sounds like something going amiss. Well, we have an answer. God did that after the fall into sin so that we would hope for something better. And he says not only that, the creation itself is hoping for something better. It's waiting for the day that our sin will no longer cause it to be futile. So in spite of these shortcomings, what are some potential benefits of the intelligent design movement? I think one of the biggest benefits is the people that are involved in the intelligent design movement, at least in modern times, they tend to be more in the scientific realm. And what science is irrelevant. Some of them are, like medical professionals. Some are astronomers. Some are geologists. Some are, get more into zoology and plant life, biology, and some are even in the clinical fields like medicine and even psychology and sociology. Some of the people that are involved in intelligent design, one of the benefits is these people can start to see patterns of intelligence in the way things work and in the way things are. It's not an accident that our bodies work the way they do. It's not an accident that that nerve goes from the brain down to the heart and back up to the larynx. It's not an accident that a volcano erupts. It's not an accident that there are millions and millions of dead things covered under layers and layers of mud and earth. All of it has an answer, and the answer is for us to share, which is the God who created us in his image and who wants to reconcile us to himself through his Son. That is the answer. Intelligent design at least gives us some scientific evidence that evolution is just nonsense. And the people that are holding to it are actually holding to their own religion. Right? That's what they're doing ultimately. They just believe it. Not because the proof is in the science. They believe it because they don't want to believe in the God who loves us. Questions or comments? I already covered the bonus material, but...
So are we saying that intelligent design is kind of a good thing?
It's both. It's like if you read through the Psalms, Seth. If the only thing you ever see in the Psalms is how beautiful God's creation is, you're missing it. Because the Psalm, every one of them, is really ultimately about Jesus. And he's in every one of them. So, the same is true with creation. It's not just the intelligent design of it is not just so that we can recognize there's a creator. It's as Paul said to the men of Athens when he was standing at the Areopagus, he's made it plain that he's not far from us, and he wants us to look for him and find him. And the place to find him is in his Son, and the place to find his Son is in the Word. So it is good if it leads you to search for God. It's just, I would say it's mostly neutral unless somebody is content to say, I don't know who that God is and I don't really care. If you end up in that place, then that would be a negative, right? I guess there is no good or bad to it. It's how a person reacts to it. Anything else? All right, well, next week, our lesson is on, it says global warming, and that shows that the lesson is a little bit dated. I'm going to broaden it to include climate change. We'll discuss all of that next week. And, maybe learn a few things from the scientific side that we didn't already know, but especially emphasize the biblical side of matters. So I will be posting that tonight. You can download it at some point, either later tonight or tomorrow at your leisure. Look at it and see if there's anything else you want to study. All right? So we'll close with prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you for revealing yourself to us in your word so that we might know you, the only true God and the Father who sent you. We thank you that in your revelation of yourself, you have shown yourself to be a Savior, one who has taken away the guilt of our sin and has reconciled us to yourself through your own suffering and death in our place. Let us use the information that we obtained tonight to your glory. give us an opportunity to speak with others about it, and when those opportunities arise, help us to open our mouths and to recall this information, and especially to share with them the good news of salvation in your name. Give us all peaceful sleep this evening. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, well, God's blessings.
Really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Looking forward to the next ones.
All right,
Bye,
me too.
Seth.
Have a good evening.